Good morning, everyone. I say good morning, but depending on where you are, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's Impact Replay webinar series. Today's a very special program, and so glad all of you can join us. We see that there are some folks that are still coming into the room, so we'll just give it just a few minutes here before we get started. But thank you all so much for coming. As you may know, we're going to be doing these kinds of webinar series over the next few weeks and also into 2022. So be on the lookout for some of that information as it comes through. We'll give you the time and the dates for those. If you do register for those, be assured that you will get a link to the recording of that program at a later date. And so we'll go ahead and get started here as folks start to come in. Today, NCBA IFCO is going to be joined by the Overseas Cooperative Development Council as we provide this replay of the international track session called Cooperative Values at Work for Present and Future Generations, Tackling Climate Change. This was featured at the 2021 Cooperative Impact Conference, which took place at the beginning of October. I'm John Torres with NCBA IFCO, and we are excited to host this webinar and so glad you've joined us here today. But before we get started, I've got just a few housekeeping notes. Today's webinar will run for approximately 90 minutes. So please, if you can, stay on through that. There's a wonderful presentation there closer to the hour mark, and it'll be important for you to be able to get that. Participants' audio and their video are going to be muted throughout the presentation. If you have a question, we do want to hear from you, so please type it into the question and answer tab that's located on the bottom of the Zoom control panel. We're going to collect those questions and we're going to get to as many of them as possible, and we'll try to get those answered for you. Now, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording is going to be shared with you via an email link in the next couple of days. Now, to get things going, I'll turn it over to our moderator, NCBA IFCO's Senior Vice President of International Development, Alex Serrano. Hey, Alex.
Thank you, JT, for that. Colleagues and friends, again, my name is Alex Serrano. I'm the Senior Vice President here with the International Development NCBA IFCO. I'm so pleased to welcome all of you here in US and around the world to this replay of one of the most relevant sections of our Co-op Impact last month. Was a whole week with our OCDC and USAID and many other partners that joined us that day. To get us started, I'm honored to introduce you to Tiana Razafimahatrata from USAID Madagascar. And Tiana, I'm very sorry about the pronunciation of your name. Tiana has been so kind to be joining us from Tana, where it is now 7 hours ahead of us. Seven hours, right, Tiana? You're muted, I believe. Yeah. But just to introduce Tiana, Tiana is the Senior Environment Specialist for the Office of Sustainable Environment and Economic Development at USAID Mission in Madagascar. She's also the Contract Officer for MICAGI, which is a biodiversity program which NCBA IFCO and several of our co-op partners in Madagascar are proud implementing partners. Sorry, before I just go in, Tiana, you may want to, if you don't mind, click on the camera and also the unmuted so you can unmute yourself. You're coming in and out your camera, okay. We actually had practiced this before. Okay, Tiana, now you're good. Yeah. And now you're unmuted. Fantastic. So let me just start again. So just really pleased to introduce Tiana. Tiana is the Senior Environmental Specialist for the Office of Sustainable Environment and Economic Development at USAID Mission in Madagascar. She's also the Contract Officer for MICAGI, which is a biodiversity program which NCBA and several of our co-op partners in Madagascar are proud implementing partners. Tiana has worked with USAID Madagascar for 17 years, beginning in 2004 as the Natural Resource Management Specialist and Environmental Compliance Specialist. She has more than 30 years of experience working on biodiversity conservation, combating wildlife trafficking, environmental governance, and climate change. while ensuring that projects comply with USAID's environmental regulations. Prior to joining USAID, Tiana worked for several NGOs like PACT, World Wildlife Fund, CARE on areas such as conservation, biodiversity, and food security. Tiana is an agroeconomist by training. She has earned certifications in natural resource management and climate change from the University of California, Davis, and in sustainable environmental management from the University of California in Berkeley. She enjoys art and decor made with natural resources. Tiana has 2 children, Tojo, an architect, and Tambi, an interior designer. She's the proud grandparent of 2 energetic grandchildren, so even more appreciative from being here today. So thank you, Tiana, and I'll let you, she's going to give her remarks as we then followed by another introduction, and then we go into the session. Thanks again, Tiana.
Okay, yeah, so good morning, everyone, and good evening at my place because it's already late in the evening here in Madagascar. Yeah, so thank you for the warm welcome and the introduction. Yeah, and my special thanks also to NCBA CLUSA for organizing this important session. I'm happy to be here representing USAID Madagascar and our continued commitment to support the cooperative's critical role in mitigating the effect of climate change and promoting conservation. As you know, Madagascar is a biodiversity hotspot, home to various plants and animals found nowhere else on Earth. More than 80% of all plant and animal species are endemic to the island. But its diverse ecosystems and unique wildlife are under threat from human activity and the changing climate. At USAID Madagascar, we are committed to helping strengthen local communities' capacities to protect their natural resources, reverse the trends of deforestation, and conserve biodiversity while also improving their livelihoods. One of the ways we do this is through our Conservation and Communities project. Under this project, we work with partners like NCBA CLUSA and Tetra Tech to implement several different activities. At the UN's COP26 conference that just wrapped up, USAID Administrator Samantha Power differentiates the work of one of these activities, Mikadi, which means to take care of, and in this case, taking care of biodiversity and taking care of communities. USAID Mikadi focuses on 2 regions in the western and northeastern Madagascar, rich in biodiversity and economic potential. Working directly with local communities who rely on land and sea resources, USAID Mikadi provides tools and knowledge to ensure those resources are available for generations to come. In northeastern Madagascar, this includes vanilla growing communities where farmers like Razafi, whom Administrator Power mentioned in her speech, have come together to form environmentally friendly cooperative businesses. She said that we can tackle climate change while also helping farmers earn a decent living, and that cooperatives are an important vehicle for ensuring we achieve both. Communities living near protected areas should not have to choose between protecting their forests and utilizing their natural resources to provide income for their families. They can do both sustainably. And the cooperative model plays a big part in facilitating this. Mikadi is just one of the USAID activities being implemented in Madagascar. During this session, you'll also hear about one of the sister activities, the Sustainable Vanilla for People and Nature activity, also known as Mafatuk locally, which means insurance for the future. So thank you for attending this session today to learn how cooperatives in different countries around the world, including Madagascar, are playing an active role in combating climate change. So again, thank you.
And thank you, Tiana, very much. And again, really appreciate your support. We're so grateful for your partnership and really look forward to our continuing collaboration in Madagascar. With that, we'll launch into the session with remarks from Dr. Rebecca Carter, who's the Acting Director of World Resource Institute, Climate Resilience Practice, followed by Anne Vaughan, the Senior Advisor on Climate Change at USAID's Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, and Frank Berg, a Senior Engineer at the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, which we around the world know as an NRECA or NRECA. Our panel discussion will be moderated by Vernon Oakes, who many in the US cooperative community know as the host of the popular radio show Everything Co-op. Werner will be joined by representatives from the cooperative and development community in US, Mexico, India, Brazil, and Madagascar, who will share their climate efforts moving toward clean energy and promoting climate-friendly solutions and practices. And so now to help us to start, I leave you with Dr. Carter.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here with you today to talk about what I've come to think of as the missing middle, the role of cooperatives in building climate resilient food systems. So I want to start off by saying that the thoughts I'm going to share today are based on the World Resources Institute's research on climate resilient and transformative adaptation for agriculture. And as you can see here, this is a list of some of our recent publications on this topic. And you can see that we've worked in different geographies, Bhutan, Ethiopia, Costa Rica. We've worked on different issues and with different organizations, including CGIAR, the big global agricultural research organization. And I wanted to also reflect for a minute before I really get started on some of the key facts that shape our work. One of them is that creating sustainable, equitable, and resilient food systems is vital to supporting the livelihoods of the millions of small-scale agricultural producers and the billions more people around the world who rely on the food they produce. The second is that global demand for food is projected to increase by 50% by 2050, but it's going to become more difficult. Average agricultural yields are expected to decline by up to 30% by 2050. So as you can see, climate change is already exacerbating food insecurity and threatening the lives and livelihoods of vulnerable small-scale food producers, as well as other people who are essential to our food systems, including people who pack food, process it, and distribute it. It is those 300 million small-scale farming households, especially the ones in developing countries, that face some of the greatest challenges. They're often the ones who are most exposed to climate change impacts, and at the same time, they have the fewest resources with which to adapt. So what we've learned from this range of work and our read of some of those key facts that I shared with you are that vulnerable communities, countries, and farmers themselves require technical support and financing to adapt to climate change impacts. Comprehensive, inclusive, and equitable national level plans and policies are essential for adaptation. So countries, national governments do indeed have a very important role to play in climate change adaptation. At the same time, farmers, fishers, and herders need to better access data, information, credit, and finance, as well as other resources to adapt. So some of this does come down to individual farmers and individual food system actors themselves. But we have also learned that there's a very important middle part when we think about adapting food systems to global climate change. And I think cooperatives and producers associations are really essential to bridging this gap between those high-level national plans and policies that I mentioned, and also the actions that farmers, fishers, and herders themselves can take. There's a middle ground there that I think cooperatives can play a really important role in. And I'm going to talk a little bit about about that in a little bit more detail. I'd like to walk you through an example of some work that we've done on transformative adaptation in Costa Rica's coffee sector. And I'll start off by kind of unpacking this term, transformative adaptation. If you're like me, you're probably hearing the word transformation everywhere, and it can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I want to say that the definition that we use is based on the IPCC's definition, and that is that transformative adaptation is adaptation that seeks to change the fundamental attributes of systems in response to actual or expected climate change impacts, often at a scale and ambition greater than incremental activities. And by incremental activities and incremental adaptation, we mean kind of more moderate, minor actions that are aimed at maintaining the essence and integrity of existing food systems. So not saying we need to change the whole system, but rather saying we need to climate proof it is the way that some people sometimes think about it. So the work that I'm going to talk about now is of the second type, transformative adaptation for Costa Rica's coffee sector. So you, like me, have also probably seen these headlines that give me a great deal of anxiety as a coffee lover about your morning cup of coffee is in danger, and can the industry adapt in time, and climate change affects or threatens your cup of coffee. So it is indeed the case that when we look at how climate change is expected to affect coffee production around the world, it is indeed a fact that by 2050, climate change will reduce the current global areas suitable for coffee by about 50% across different emission scenarios. I should also mention, though, that, and those are the brown areas on the maps where coffee production around the world will become less suitable, more difficult because of climate change. I should also mention, though, that coffee production may become more feasible in some areas, for example, cooler locations that will become warm enough for coffee. And of course, for coffee farmers, current coffee farmers in places where coffee becomes less suitable and harder to produce, they are going to need to switch to new types of crops that they'll have to produce. And that's what we were really focusing on in this project. So just to narrow this down to Costa Rica, this map, which is based on data from a Costa Rican researcher, shows kind of a worst case emission scenario by 2050, so a high emission scenario. Under that scenario, you can see that quite a lot of Costa Rica's coffee growing areas become less suitable for coffee production. The gray areas are expected to remain about the same. The green areas will actually become more favorable for coffee production, but these yellow and particularly the orange areas are places where it really is going to become quite a lot more challenging for coffee producers. And I should note also that this map does not include the kinds of adaptation measures that, that we're focused on these days. So looking at this work in Costa Rica and thinking about our field work and what we learned there, we did find that some farmers, especially in Guanacaste province, which is up in the kind of drier, arid northwestern part of the country, have started switching over to citrus crops just all on their own. And they're doing this because oranges in particular are perceived to have lower climate risks. Farmers say that they're more resistant to drought and they require less water. They're also finding that there's some pretty important market benefits to producing citrus instead of coffee. There's greater harvest flexibility, and they're also finding more stable prices. However, there are some drawbacks that are already emerging. And one of them is disease as a problem. And there are new diseases that are becoming bigger problems. One that is of particular concern right now is called yellow dragon. And we've also noticed that it tends to be wealthier farmers who are making the switch on their own. And I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail in a minute. So when we think about, if citrus is a crop that could be grown in places of Costa Rica and other countries that might become less suitable for coffee, what more needs to happen for that kind of transformation to take place? And so if we think about what more needs to happen to improve our understanding, it is true that uncertainty remains just around just how sustainable this transition to citrus would be. More research and development is required to create sustainable, equitable pathways and more analysis of things like market feasibility and pest and diseases. We also need improved planning. As I mentioned earlier, the shifts that we're seeing so far are autonomous. So they so far are really lacking sort of strategic or targeted or coordinated long-term planning. This is just some farmers who are able to, experimenting on their own. So we think that national and subnational policymakers should start considering how to support these kinds of transitions in the short term, which is what most farmers think about, but then also in the medium and longer terms, and as well as alternative pathways when crops that have traditionally been produced become less viable in some areas. There's also some changes that are needed in finance, I'm sorry. So as I mentioned earlier, it is the wealthy farmers who are able to start making this transition right now. And we think it's because they have greater access to critical resources like credit. That's why they're able to lead these transitions. Most others are going to need more support to make these kinds of changes. We also have noted that farmers and investors should be also considering longer term, more patient and predictable funding, as well as credit mechanisms to support these kinds of shifts. So what does all of this have to do with cooperatives? Well, putting it in the same structure as what still needs to happen, it seems to us that cooperatives have a really important role to play in enabling these kinds of transitions and other sorts of climate change adaptation that we're going to need to see more of around the world. We find that they can be quite an effective way of channeling new information that farmers are going to need to make shifts to new types of crops or new ways of growing the current crops. We also think that cooperatives can be perfectly positioned to promote things like peer-to-peer learning and sharing of best practices among cooperatives themselves, but also among farmers. We think that there's a lot of scope for cooperatives to help move adaptation beyond these autonomous actions that only individual, often wealthier farmers are able to take, to getting more types of farmers on board with taking the kinds of actions that more farmers are going to need to take. And it also seems that cooperatives can be quite effective in channeling local needs and local experiences to those high-level policymakers, and kind of helping determine what gets included in climate plans, what kind of funding becomes available. And that brings me to my final point, which is about finance. So we think that cooperatives can indeed be a very important way of improving access and support to climate change adaptation finance, where it may be easier and just more feasible to work through cooperatives than trying to reach all individual farmers, or working at this higher level of national level or even state level, where sometimes poorer farmers can fall through the cracks. We also think that that cooperatives could be a more appealing way for private sector funders and investors to start working with individual farmers, to start working with cooperatives rather than individual farmers or entire states, regions, or countries. And with that, I believe I'm about out of time. Thank you very much for your attention. You can find more information at WRI.org. Just search the site for climate resilience and you'll find some of the work that I mentioned earlier. And you're also most welcome to contact me at rebeccacarter.org. Thanks.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the importance of cooperatives in preventing climate change and helping communities adapt to the impacts of a warming planet. And a hearty congratulations to CUSA for putting on an excellent event. The Biden-Harris administration is committed to ramping up the United States climate ambitions and understands that achieving the targets of meeting the Paris Agreement, including helping developing countries adapt to the climate crisis, means working together. As you may have heard, last month, President Biden committed to doubling our climate finance by 2024 to tackle the climate crisis, and also announced $10 billion assistance for food security over the next 5 years. We're very excited that this includes $5 billion for Feed the Future investments that have proven to make an impact on decreasing poverty and hunger. We know climate change is not a future scenario. It is happening now, and lives depend on creative solutions we implement for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and helping communities adapt to an already changing climate. The importance of cooperative efforts in this front cannot be overstated. The climate crisis impacts everyone, and solutions must be created in inclusive environments, and co-ops are excellent vehicles for fostering inclusive solutions. We know they offer approaches that move away from the top-down strategies and give people ownership over climate solutions. Because of this, within USAID, partnering with cooperatives is essential for helping to advance our mission and climate ambition. For example, USAID's Cooperative Development Program, in a partnership with Equal Exchange, indigenous-owned coffee cooperatives in Mexico, such as Camiñan Nopec and Finca Triunfo Verde, are leading activities to advance local priorities like conservation, ecotourism, climate-resilient coffee production, and beekeeping. Through this program and in partnership with the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association International, USAID has also supported the development of locally owned and managed rural electric cooperatives in Liberia and Uganda, which provides access to reliable, affordable, and clean energy to thousands of households. But there's much more for all of us to do. For example, at USAID, we're further ramping up our climate efforts, including through the development of a whole-of-agency climate strategy. Next month at COP26 in November, USAID will share our draft climate change strategy for public comment, and we welcome your feedback into this important effort. We look forward to working with you here today and co-ops around the world to help address the climate crisis. This truly is a time to pull our resources and expertise and take meaningful action together. Thank you in advance for your partnership.
This is Frank Berg, Senior Engineer for Off-Grid Electrification at NRECA International. In 2017, we partnered with a community in northern Liberia to establish the Tota Electric Cooperative. Located 80 kilometers from Monrovia, this particular town was selected because it's on a major highway and lies along a major east-west road running through Liberia towards the border with Ivory Coast. Our team recognized the potential for growth, and today, this rural electric co-op is self-sufficient, growing, and the reliable electricity has helped to turn this town into a vibrant way station. I spent half of last month in Tota alongside the technicians and staff of the Tota Electric Cooperative, or TEC, and I'd like to share with you what this cooperative has taught me about resiliency and mitigating climate change. I was in Tota to oversee efforts to repair and expand the capabilities of the solar power plant that 400 TEC members own, operate, and maintain, serving about 2,000 people in the community. Tota isn't the biggest or wealthiest town in rural Liberia, but it's the only community with a self-sustaining electric cooperative, one of the largest renewable energy systems in the country, and the first private electricity provider to be licensed by the Liberian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Unlike most electric cooperatives worldwide that focus primarily on customer service and maintenance, TEC owns and operates its own independent microgrid and solar hybrid power plant, 60 kilometers from the nearest public power infrastructure. In a country where only 26% of the population has access to electricity, the community of Tota shines like a beacon along the Kakata to Banga highway, an hour's drive in any direction from the nearest streetlight. And yet, in this community, there's live music, cold drinks, frozen food storage, lights for the nurses in the maternity ward, students studying late into the evening, and a cooperative board that keeps the lights on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This power system is on the cutting edge of the clean energy technology and unprecedented in this part of Liberia. Local technicians are trained to manage the system, and the cooperative board sets fair prices for electricity rates to ensure economic autonomy and member economic participation. Soon after TEC was established, the power plant was damaged in a lightning strike and took the solar power offline. The COVID-19 pandemic made it virtually impossible to make the necessary repairs, but rather than go without power, the cooperative board took a vote to raise their own electricity rates to keep the grid running on its diesel backup generator. The members democratically agreed to accept a 300% price increase on their electricity rates to sustain the co-op's increased fuel costs and share the mutual responsibility to invest in the co-op's economic survival. This is hardly a climate change mitigation strategy, but for me, the Tota Electric Cooperative underscores that resilient communities are the bedrock of climate resiliency. In developing countries, when infrastructure fails, families often learn to do without. But in Tota, the cooperative governance and a spirit of mutuality helped the community to band together despite the adversity of COVID-19 and the increased price of electricity. While waiting for my return to Tota to assist with repairing the solar plant, the community remains steadfast and united in supporting the cooperative. The power consumption in the mini-grid steadily increased as members invested in new appliances and started new businesses. Now the community is an economic hub along the highway. Business owners like Joanna Colley, who is today TEC's largest electricity consumer, runs a profitable business where produce, fish, and meat are harvested daily, frozen overnight, and delivered each morning to surrounding towns and marketplaces. Several local entrepreneurs, like Joanna, have started cold rooms with custom air conditioning units mounted to 20-foot shipping containers in their storefronts to refrigerate bulk foods and ensure that food doesn't spoil before reaching the market, even days after harvest. Clarina, the head nurse, runs the maternity ward overnight and proudly told me it's one of the only rural maternity clinics in Liberia where babies don't have to be delivered with a flashlight. She also feels secure walking the streets at night because between the maternity ward and her house, because she knows the streetlights will be on. Light is life, she told me, almost like a prayer. Now, the next generation in Tota is growing up with 24/7 reliable electricity service, a human right that 3.5 billion people, roughly half the world's population, still do not enjoy. Today, TEC has sufficient revenue surplus and has obtained 2 loans from NRECA International to pay for additional poles, wires, smart meters, and accessories to connect an additional 50 members to their grid by the end of this year. Underscoring mutual aid between cooperatives, America's electric cooperatives have donated funds for small business loans so TEC members can purchase electrical appliances to promote productive use of electricity in the mini-grid. The local shops are selling ventilation fans, televisions, stereos, refrigerators, and chest freezers, a clear indication that the cooperative has a transformative impact on the town's vibrancy. NRECA International recently completed a World Bank funded project for the Liberian Ministry of Energy, in which we recommended an additional 300 rural communities to adopt similar renewable energy microgrid infrastructure, following Tota's example of resiliency, determination, and unity, as Liberia strives for universal electrification by 2030. With the solar power back online, the TEC board is poised to approve discounted electricity rates this month to reflect the lower fuel consumption, with expansion to follow in November. We know that when people have access to clean, reliable, and affordable power, the results are powerful. In developing and growing communities like Tota, sectors like agriculture, education, healthcare, and security are strengthened because of the solid electrical infrastructure and strong cooperative governance. We know that solar power and renewable energy are helpful tools for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and mitigating climate change. But the community in Tota taught me that technology plays only a facilitating role in the energy transition. I'm proud to contribute my technical expertise and training to the TEC technicians. My time in Tota strengthened my belief that cooperative unity, democratic governance, mutual economic participation, and communal solidarity are the real solutions to climate change. In the words of Joseph Scott, TEC's board president, without unity, we will not move an inch. Thank you very much.
And I want to thank NCB for having this very important discussion. And thank Liz Bailey and all the people that pulled this together. It is a great panelist that you're going to listen to today that's going to talk about what co-ops are doing to solve this major, major problem. You know, we talk about the COVID-19 pandemic. It has caused 4.72 million deaths around the world in the last year and a half. But most recently, as early as July, a new study came out that said climate change has already become deadly enough to cause 5 million extra deaths worldwide each year. This is a major, major issue. Climate change is a long-term alteration of temperatures and typical weather patterns in a particular country or in a particular place. The cause of current climate change is largely due to human activity, burning coal and oil, cutting down forests, increasing livestock farming, producing fertilizer that contains nitrogen products. You know, greenhouse gases trap heat in the atmosphere. When the sun passes through the atmosphere, the greenhouse gases absorb the radiation and prevent the heat from leaving the atmosphere. This is known as the greenhouse gas effect. Without greenhouse gases, the average temperature on Earth would be far too cold to sustain life. However, when we add more greenhouse gases to the atmosphere through human activity, this causes more of the sun's energy to get trapped in the atmosphere, heating up the Earth and causing global warming. Greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide and methane. Global warming has increased the world's temperature about 1% over the last 100 years. And currently, countries around the world are working toward the target set out in the Paris Agreement, which aims to keep the global temperature rise below 2% Celsius and hopefully limit it to 1.5%. China produces the most carbon dioxide. The United States is second. India is third. You know, that's one of the most well-known effects of global warming is that the sea ice and the glacier in the Arctic are melting. The sea level is expected to rise, and countries around the world will be affected by this level increase. Rainforest destruction is a major cause of carbon dioxide release, and the forests are those that traps the carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. Coral reefs are being destroyed. So individuals can speak up. Power your home with renewable energy, weatherize, invest in energy efficient appliances, reduce water waste. Actually eat the food you buy better bulbs, pull the plugs, drive a fuel efficient vehicle, maintain that vehicle, and choose to live in a walkable, smart growth cities where you don't have to use transportation as much. The other thing you can do is reduce the amount of waste generate and recycle. Climate change is a very complex issue. And even though human activity is causing a rise in global warming, not everyone is equally responsible. Some countries have higher carbon emissions than others, while certain businesses and industry create more environmental damage than others. Often, the people who are least responsible for climate change can be the most impacted by it. Developing countries with low levels of carbon emissions usually experience the worst effects of climate change from flooding, drought, and other extreme weather events, and they have fewer resources available to help them adapt to these effects of climate. Meanwhile, richer countries and businesses and corporations responsible for global warming are less impacted, and they have more resources to protect themselves from many of those impacts. Climate change is the biggest threat facing humanity today, much bigger than COVID-19, and action needs to be taken and taken fast. So today, we're going to talk about what co-ops are doing, what we're doing right now, and why co-ops is organizations that in their DNA, in their values and principles are just really able to, perhaps better than any other institution, to combat this climate change. And our first panelist, Judy Bumgardner, will talk about work that's being done in Mexico. Julia is the Cooperative Development Program Manager at Equal Exchange. And Julia manages USAID funded award that strengthens small-scale agricultural cooperatives. She has a master's in development practice from the Tropical Agriculture Research and Higher Education Center in Costa Rica, and a BA in sociology and Spanish from the University of Wisconsin. Julia has been working in Latin America with fair trade coffee cooperatives in different capacities. Welcome, Julia, and would you please tell us what you all are doing in Mexico to change the emissions and this climate change?
All right, thank you, Vernon, for the introduction, and it's great to be here on this panel with all of you today. Thanks for NCBA CLUSA, also and OCDC for putting this together. I'm going to share a little bit today about work with Equal Exchange, which is an alternative trade organization. We're also a workaround cooperative, and we work with small-scale farming cooperatives around the world with a number of different supply chains. And I'm going to talk today about what we're doing together with our cooperative development program with coffee cooperatives in southern Mexico, in Chiapas. I'll talk a little bit about how cooperatives and farmers have been impacted, what this means for the coffee supply chain, and then talk about how cooperatives are responding to this crisis and one specific initiative that we're working on together. So next slide, please. So how are farmers affected? So we all know that farmers are severely affected by climate change. It's specifically affecting their productivity levels. We're seeing an increase in pests and diseases, increase in temperatures, increase in stronger rains and more intense droughts. There's also a presence of forest fires in the area, lack of water supply for irrigation for the farms. And this is causing harvest periods to fluctuate, which is also impacting financing. And alongside this, we're also seeing challenges with migration. So high levels of migration from southern Mexico, and also this is impacting labor and access to labor to work on the farms as well. Next slide. This slide was shared recently in a seminar that we participated with, but these are the projections of what they're estimating for suitable land for coffee production in Chiapas, in the area where we're working. They're projecting increase in temperatures and loss in participation will cause a strong reduction up to 97% in areas that are apt or suitable for high quality coffee production. In these maps, it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see a reduction in this land for coffee production. And the trends will show that the higher elevations will see more suitable land for coffee production, but the lower areas will see less suitable land for coffee production. This is important because this area is surrounding a really important cloud forest and biosphere called El Triunfo, which provides a lot of ecosystem services for the area. Next slide. So what does this look like for the impacts on the coffee value chain? Increase in cost of production, both for labor and management strategies to adapt. Lower productivity, but higher prices. They're expecting more volatile prices due to extreme weather events. We're seeing this right now in Brazil, and how weather events there are impacting overall global coffee prices. And then abandoning coffee farms or converting to other activities due to structural weaknesses and socioeconomic conditions. So again, this idea of migration as a result of lack of suitable land for coffee production. Next slide. So where do cooperatives fit into this? Cooperatives are an important structure that can provide technical assistance and promote regenerative agriculture practices and mitigate and adapt to climate change for small-scale farmers around the world. Here you can see a large-scale nursery that's not only for coffee plants but also for timber trees and fruit trees, and it's centralized, so it can be distributed to thousands of farmers. Next slide. And again, with this idea of technical assistance, the cooperatives can have agronomists that can reach more farmers through this technical assistance. They can provide practical approaches using hands-on practical learning through field schools, as you can see in the photo. They can promote diverse activities depending on the local context and needs, and they can connect with farming networks around the world. Next slide. And more specifically, some of the cooperatives that we're working with, and specifically in Mexico, some of the activities that we're supporting with our coffee cooperatives is promoting these sustainable production systems, including reforestation, promoting agroforestry systems with coffee and cacao farms, promoting regenerative agriculture with a focus on soil health by producing organic compost and fertilizer and distributing that. So that's the photo on the left. And they can monitor the quality and the production levels and distribute them in a more centralized way to farmers. They can also promote diversification on farms, both through crops, but also income sources, things like payment for ecosystem services, ecotourism, et cetera, and focusing on improved varietals that will be more resistant to climate change in the future. Co-ops are also working on environmental education programs to educate youth. And we're partnering with Root Capital as well to promote climate risk analysis using technology and data to come up with adaptation plans for the cooperatives. And then we're also assessing the viability of measuring carbon footprints and assessing carbon capturing capacity and seeing if this is something that's worthwhile for the cooperatives. Next slide. And one initiative we're working on right now that I'm really excited and proud of is that we found this kind of a gap between access to research and information about climate change and best practices for the cooperatives. So the cooperatives had many questions about, what are the climate models and what are the best practices and how can we adapt and mitigate these effects. So we're partnering with an organization called Gaia, who also has put together a group, kind of a working group of researchers that are very well versed in climate change and coffee, to kind of bridge this gap and provide more information and access to these resources to the cooperatives that we're working with. So we're trying to identify best practices for technical assistance programs to implement with the farmers. We're also working to try to visualize climate change impacts through interactive maps and connecting them to present the information in a way that's really digestible and in an understandable format for these technical assistance programs. We want to kind of combine the conservation of natural resources and ecosystem services of the El Triunfo biosphere with coffee farms surrounding the buffer zone. And our goal is eventually to create an investment and action plan together with the coffee cooperatives to implement a strategy based on integration of biodiversity in the coffee supply chain. We've seen a large interest, kind of everyone coming to the table with their own resources, also these researchers and other NGOs, finance organizations, certification organizations, and we're really working to rise to the urgency of the situation because we feel that there's no time to wait. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you so very much for telling us what is going on in Mexico with the coffee production. I heard increase in temperatures, increase in costs, lower productivity, and you have to do all of these things. And one of the reasons that co-ops is so well suited for this is because of the values of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. And you just mentioned fifth principle of training. That's education, training, and information. The sixth principle of cooperation is cooperation among cooperatives that's working together. And the seventh is concern for the community. And you have to be concerned for community with its climate change. And now we're going to talk to Tarun Bhargava is going to talk to us about what the co-ops are doing in India. He's the general manager in charge of sustainable cooperative development team at the Indian Farmers Fertilizer Cooperative. He works with approximately 36,000 member cooperative societies. He graduated from BITS Pilani as a chemical engineer. He works extensively with the international community with an objective to build strong agricultural cooperatives. Thank you for being here, Mr. Tarun. I know it's later in the day, but would you please tell us what you're doing in India to combat the emissions of CO2 and other gases.
Thank you, Waman, and welcome to all my cooperative friends in USA and internationally working cooperatives across the globe. And I'm very happy to join this panel today. And I'll request you to put the presentation on. Just next slide, please. So as you see, this presentation shows the IFCO's initiatives innovatively to mitigate the impact of climate change. Since 2009, we have been working on Save the Soil campaign. So I'll just put a brief about IFCO. IFCO is an agriculture cooperative, and we are working with the farmers. Farmers are our members, and around 50 million farmers are working with us. And we are dedicated for making them happy and their lives prosperous. So we have launched these programs in past. Since 2009, we had launched Save the Soil campaign, the biogas promotion campaign, rotavator implementation, the water source management, implementation of solar projects, CO2 emission reduction in the production units where we produce the fertilizers, chemical fertilizers. So we have been upgrading our technologies and always trying to modernize the plants to reduce the CO2 emission. We have launched recently a Sagarica, which is a seaweed extract biostimulant, production of biofertilizers and biopesticides, plantation of 10 million neem trees, innovative nanotechnology based fertilizers, which is a newly formed project and which is just in the nascent stage, and we have launched this product in the market. Next slide, please. So here I show you a small movie. I'm not getting the voice, please.
Is the greatest challenge facing humanity today, affecting both humans and non-humans. The past couple of years have been very challenging due to continuing disruptions caused by COVID-19 pandemic and its aftershocks. Farmers and global supply chains are suffering from more extreme weather events and an increased incidence of farm disturbance. Agriculture is a major source of GHGs, which contribute to the greenhouse effect and climate change. Climate change is likely to contribute substantially to food insecurity in the future by increasing food prices and reducing food production. However, under the right conditions, agriculture can provide a multitude of environmental services that can help mitigate against climate change. IFCO, the world's largest fertilizer cooperative, has come a long way since its inception in 1967 by empowering the farmers and helping them increase their crop yield and food grain quality. Through its products like Sagarica, IFCO has brought a paradigm shift in ensuring a sustainable and smart agriculture. IFCO has taken the lead with its scientists developing a path-breaking and game-changing product based on nanotechnology. IFCO's consistent R&D efforts and the vision of their MD, Shri Uday Shankar Awasthi, the Nano Urea is a scientifically advanced, high-potency fertilizer, providing rich and valuable nutrients to the crop and thus improving nutrient efficiency. It also protects the soil from environmental damage commonly caused by conventional chemical-based fertilizers, thereby ensuring better nutritive quality of the crop. Nano Urea, therefore, stands as a promising, sustainable, and environmental friendly solution to conventional bulk ureous fertilizers like urea. By way of the nano products, IFCO has emboldened the spirit of the 21st century's Indian farmer and has been a pillar of his strength and pride. IFCO stands for ensuring food security and mitigating climate change.
No, I had couple of more slides, yeah, on nano fertilizer. So I'll just talk about for a minute on nano fertilizer. You can visit our website www.nanourea.in and www.ifco.in, which is our parent site. You can find a lot of information about the nano urea product. And this is a innovative technology which is based on nanotechnology. And for the first time, we have produced this nano urea in the world. So this nano urea will replace the urea chemical fertilizer and very much affect the climate practices which we are following to mitigate the climate change. So I think the movie you saw talked about the same thing. And thank you very much, everyone, to see this movie and listen to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tyrone. When we finish the other next two panelists, thank you, Tyrone. When we finish the next two panelists, I would like for all of the panelists to think about, there's this, what does it cost to implement these programs? Tyrone just talked about a number of them that they're doing in India, working with the 36,000 member farmers, cooperative societies in agriculture in India. What's the cost, and what kind of conversation do you have at the board level about the cost versus the rewards? I have it that co-ops are concerned about people first, planet second, and profit third. But capitalists, too often, businesses are concerned about three things also. That's profit, profit, and profit. And so there's this conversation, and that's one of the reasons that co-ops is so well in position to tackle this problem of climate change. So our next panelist is Eduardo Avila, who's a 25-year-old executive director of Revolución Solar, an NGO created in 2015 with the aim of promoting the sustainable development of low-income communities through solar energy. Eduardo received a degree in economics from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro with a focus on energy, economics, and finance. He was one of 5 Latin American and Caribbean finalists of the UN Environmental Program, Young Champions of the Earth 2020, with this particular project. Eduardo, would you tell us what you are doing in Brazil to combat climate change?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Vernon, for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be with you all. So I'll bring a different perspective on climate change here, kind of the social and economic aspect of the climate change and the energy crisis. So Brazil right now is living its most severe energy crisis in the history. So when we talk about prices, the energy is very expensive here in Rio and Brazil right now. The risk of blackouts are real. And this week, some events of blackouts are really happening here. And the way that the policymakers in energy in Brazil are choosing to get away from this crisis is the fossil fuel path that we all know it's not the right way, right? Because it's more polluting and it's more expensive than the renewables. Next, please. And because Yeah, and on the other hand, we're seeing solar energy technology getting even cheaper every year. Right now, this is a brief introduction about the thing, but the next slide shows that the International Energy Agency already says that, next slide, please, that solar energy is the cheapest electricity source in the history. So we have a lot of opportunity there, not only to fight against climate change with a renewable energy source, but also to promote a sustainable development with a cheapest electricity source. And next slide, please, with a energy source that is the leader in renewable energy sources in terms of job creation. So we have a lot of opportunities here, not only in the environmental aspect, but on the social and economic aspect, to promote what we call a solar revolution. That's why the name of the nonprofit, Revolu Solar. Next slide, please. So that's what we aim here at Revolu Solar, to promote the sustainable development of those low-income communities that need the most an accessible, reliable energy source with this magical technology that is solar energy. Next, please. And yeah, there were a few slides, but yeah, we work with what we call the solar cycle methodology, that we promote altogether the environmental education that solar enables us, the job training of the residents as solar installers, and the solar installation. And yeah, so we are very aligned with this UN 2030 agenda, with the SDGs. And for this work, we've been receiving some awards, important awards here in Brazil and internationally. Next, please. And right now, we just pilot project that we want to scale up in Brazil and Latin America. That is the first solar energy cooperative ever in a Brazilian favela, because the solar has this structure, this framework that enables decentralized energy generation. And this harmonizes a lot with the traditions of the communities here in Brazil of cooperation, collaboration, and collective action. That is the center of cooperatives, the solar. So this is the model that we bet on replicating here in Brazil. It has a lot of technical and economic advantages compared with the individual installations. Next slide, please. And it has a economic sustainability model that the cooperative members pay a monthly bill that is part of the savings they have on the utility bill to keep the cooperative running. Because the main thing of solar is cheaper, but you need to have the initial capital to invest to cover the upfront costs. And it lets the low-income people outside of this solar revolution from benefiting of these opportunities. So we designed this model to make the low-income people to benefit from solar as well, with a model that is adequate for them. Next slide, please. And we have some partners that are helping us with the solar revolution, but we are looking for more partners to expand this solar revolution in Brazil next year. Next slide, please. So I invite you all to be part of this solar revolution with us. We are on all these social media, the website revolusolar.com.br, and I'm available. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Eduardo. So I like this revolution, the solar revolution. And as we heard earlier from Rebecca Carter, how to transform food systems in the face of climate change. You're talking about how to transform the solar, the energy with its climate change. And she is talking about the co-ops are in the middle because of our training, which is our fifth principle, which we've already talked about. We can train our employees, we can train the community at large. Also, this cooperation and you have talked about, which I really like, is what one can do to help these low-income communities by getting that capital together to create the solar. So that's phenomenal, and doing it cooperatively with our principles and values. So now we're going to go to our fourth panelist, Zoili Ramanaso, who is working with sustainable vanilla for people and nature. The project is called Mafaktoka and is in Madagascar. The project is aimed to support vanilla producers cooperatives to generate sustainable income from high quality and certified vanilla and to reduce deforestation, avoiding greenhouse gas emissions. Zoila speaks Malagasy, and she's fluent in French and English, and she has an alumnus from the Environmental Leadership Program, University of California at Berkeley. She has 25 years in development field and 10 years of consulting experience throughout the world. I'm looking forward to seeing what Zoili and are doing in Madagascar with sustainable vanilla for people and nature. Zoili. Zoili, thank you.
Please unmute.
Sorry. Hi. Thanks, Vernon, and thanks for the opportunity you gave me. Thanks for everybody for attending this presentation. Mafatuki is a Malagasy name speaking about insurance of the future. And this is a project to support vanilla producers to produce sustainable vanilla, and as well to ensure sustainable management of natural resources. Next slide, please. Mafatuki is a 3 years project co-financed by USAID Madagascar and McCormick. And we are working with 2,000 farmers gathered in 5 cooperatives, and the 5 cooperative is gathering in 1 cooperative union. The objective of the project is really ensure the vanilla production, certified vanilla production with high quality, but at the same time ensure reducing threats on biodiversity and also ensuring the sustainable management of natural resources. As you all know, that vanilla is planting growing under forest. So that's why we really help farmers to, at the same time, ensure the improvement of the production, but also to really ensure lowering greenhouse gas and doing all the agricultural techniques that are mitigating climate change and also having some adaptation. Next slide, please. What we are doing in terms of mitigation, I'm going to really speaking about the age, farmer age here, because those farmers are producing certified vanilla under the Rainforest Alliance certification. So the Rainforest Alliance certification is ensuring the member to ban the use of fire. This is to really ensure the biodiversity management as well, to increase reforestation and agroforestry under their land. And the farmer were able, for the first year of implementation, to produce 55 tree seedlings, and they put that on the land. And we have 110,000 seedlings as well in projection. To monitor the decrease of greenhouse gas emission, we have developed the mapping tools that define the farmers' lands where they are using for primary forest, the secondary forest, agroforestry within their vanilla plots, as well as all the reforestation activities. So from that exercises and using teledetection activity of the evolution of the forest cover, we were able for the last implementation year to sequestrate the equivalent of 20,000 tons of carbon. Next slide, please. Yeah, as you can see on the left, we have the participatory mapping with the community. They are trying to identify their land, and then we define the polygon of their plots and digitalize them. And from that, we monitor the fire on the land and also monitor the improvement of vegetation cover. On the right, you have the tree nursery examples developed by a farmer. Next slide, please. What we are doing in terms of climate change adaptation, we have trained farmers to improve their vanilla quality production by adjusting the soil fertility, producing compost and mulching, also improve the nutritional deficiency and treatment of the vanilla plant, and also train farmers about how to really ensure the ecological condition for the vanilla plants, like shading treatment or disease treatment as well. Next slide, please. As you can see here, there is a comparison of the fire used by non-member and the cooperative member. You have the red dots representing fires produced, unfortunately, by the farmers that are not member of the cooperative. And on the right, we have a very different, very few dots on fire, red dots for fire. Next slide, please. As you can see on the table, we have monitored the number of fire within the free communes from 2029 until 2021 this year. And in 2022, we had an increase of number of fire because due to the decrease in vanilla price, farmers have resorted to produce rice on slash and burn. So that's why we had lots of increase of practice for fire. But in comparison to the community, the cooperative member, as you can see, there is a very huge difference on cooperative members by using fire. And this year, we were able to have the impact of all the activity we did in 2020 on deforestation, on environmental education, on farmer training to improve vanilla production and all the agroforestry management. So this year, we recorded 0 fire on the cooperative members. So that's why we can say we have the result of those activity in terms of mitigation and adaptation for this year. And I think this is the last slide about the community, vanilla producer community. You have the women members of the cooperative, and you have the flowers of vanilla planifolia. That is the vanilla from Madagascar. And just recall that Madagascar is the first world producer of vanilla. So that's why it's really very important to support the vanilla producers cooperative. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, Zoili. I like Mafatoki means insurance for the future. And I think we all could use that term, insurance for the future, because we say that climate change is one of the biggest threats facing humanity today, with 5 million deaths a year associated with climate change. And action is needed. And what each of you, Julia in Mexico and the coffee farmers, Tehran in India, the 36,000 farmers, Eduardo in low-income communities in Brazil, getting the capital needed to put in solar panels where these communities could not. And Zoe talking about the 2,000 farmers and what you're doing to reduce fires and increase productivity in vanilla. So the first question I would like that each of you talk about, and Tyrone, I thought about it when you were talking, is one of the big problems with getting a handle on climate change is the cost of all of these programs. And you just talked about the cost of the programs. You talked about the different programs that you are putting together for your 36,000 farmers, but what's the atmosphere if you've been in the boardrooms or with the staff about looking at these programs and saying it's going to cost X and that's going to take away from the bottom line. We won't have as large a return on investment by doing this. And what would cause you all to go ahead and do it? And I would like to go around to each one of you. Tyrone, could you answer it first?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'd like to start it from the story of IFCO. In 1967, we had only 57 cooperatives. 57 cooperative societies, and it was just $500,000 we started with. So it was very difficult to convince people about the cooperatives in 1967. And we had the small farmers of India who had very less money contributing to form cooperatives, to be member of cooperatives. So from the day one IFCO was instituted, and especially I like to mention here that with the help of NCBA CLUSA from USA and ACDI VOCA from USA and Government of India. And today we have 36,000 cooperative societies, around 50 million farmers who are our members. So we are affecting the life of these 50 million farmers. So we believe that and our board believes that our managing director, our management, our members also, who are forming the general body of the cooperative. We have the board from these cooperative societies in India. So we believe in giving back to the farmers, the members. So that is the main thing, that is the belief we have in our boardroom, in the top management. So we have many programs, like we have empowerment of member societies working on the 7th principle. We are giving 20% dividend on the shares to the members. We are providing them facilities to market the product of IFCO, which is the fertilizer. And then we are improving the business efficiencies of our members cooperative societies, we are enhancing the agricultural productivity of the members, the small farmers, by providing them free facilities like I mentioned, the Save the Soil campaign. We are providing them soil health cards and all that what my dear friends were talking on this session, on this panel. We have a very big scale of doing all these things. So because we have 36,000 cooperative societies, and when it comes to environment, you see recently we have launched this very innovative project, and we have this product nano urea liquid fertilizer, which is we have already signed MOUs with Brazil, Argentina, and Philippines to transfer the technology to them free of cost to produce a nano fertilizer with OCB, with Copra in Argentina. So again, the co-op to co-op cooperation and co-op to co-op trade. So all this is built in our blood of IFCO. So we firmly believe in giving back to our members, not only members in India, but also our cooperative friends across the globe. And when you say that the money involved and the financial backup, we believe that we have to increase our incomes rather than cutting the cost on these programs. So when IFCO started, we were just one cooperative, a small cooperative. Today we are a big cooperative. And under the umbrella of IFCO, we have many diversified initiatives like in rural telephony, in insurance. We have production plants in Jordan and Oman outside India. So we have 18 to 20 subsidiaries of IFCO today from just one IFCO, which was in 1967. So that is the belief we have to give back, to increase our incomes, to serve our farmers, to serve our members, and make their lives with, fill their lives with sustainable objectives, and helping especially the women, youth with technology. That is the aim. Thank you.
Arun, you got it. You really talked a lot about the third principle, member economic participation. Normally, there's something you pay to get in, but you get these dividends, you get this knowledge, you get this education, you get the technological support. So you give back more than what they give in, and that causes everybody to grow, even if you put in the cost of these different programs. Julia, would you talk to us about that same question, this struggle between what it costs for these programs and the benefits for your farmers?
Yeah, and I think I would also ask the question of what's the cost of not doing this work?
Great.
You know, and what's the long-term impact of not doing this work? And I think going beyond some of these economic questions, but finding, you know, the environmental value also in a lot of this work. And one example of this is like working with native bees, and we're supporting some of our cooperatives to promote native bee production and how that connects to pollination. And it's kind of hard to monetize that, but there's a strong ecological value to that. That goes, you know, beyond the economic value, but will, you know, support these farmers in the long term and support their production. And especially for me, it was really alarming to see the mapping and the projections for into the future of suitable land production for coffee. And if we don't do anything and we head down that path, what does that look like? And how does that, you know, continue to encroach on these really valuable resources like the cloud forest? How does that cause more migration? What does that mean economically, you know, for us in the United States and for these communities that are left behind? And so I think, again, focusing on the value of the cooperatives and their capacity, you know, like you said, is economic participation and how you can pool resources together and make it work for them. You know, some of these cooperatives are using like their fair trade premiums that they receive to pool these resources together and implement composting facilities and distribute that to the farmers at a lower cost, or they're producing it themselves so they can reduce the costs. But I think just kind of the survival of the farmers is really essential to focus on improving their productivity and making sure that coffee production is still viable to them as a way of life and a livelihood. And then the other piece that I think about, got into a little bit, but with the work that we're doing with these seminars and these research, kind of connecting researchers to the cooperatives to better understand what these projections are and what best practices are. And we initially started with one seminar, and then this whole working group of all these researchers and different stakeholders from around Mexico kind of signed on to do 5 different seminars, and it's not something that's like funded necessarily by anybody, but it's everyone coming together with their own resources and again rising to the urgency of the situation. And I think I've been really moved by that everyone is really aware of how dire the consequences are if we don't do anything. So I think, again, focusing on that question of what's the cost of not doing this kind of work.
Thank you so much. I like that question too. And Eduardo, what's the cost of not doing this work?
Exactly. When it comes to energy, this thing that Julia said is very true. The cost of not doing anything is increasing to unsustainable levels when it comes to energy. Fossil fuels are getting more expensive every year. They have a limit. You have a limit of oil in the world, so it's getting more expensive. In Brazil, we have a particular situation as well, that the energy loss are very high. So energy is very expensive. People make illegal connection, and it makes the energy more expensive to the other people. So, and we don't have to talk about the natural disasters that are consequence of the climate change. So the cost of not doing anything is increasingly unsustainable. And as I showed in my presentation, solar is getting cheaper. So, but the thing is the initial investment, as we talked, Vernon. So I think that this is the thing that we have to address, the initial investment, but we have to see it as a long-term investment, a long-term, as I say, 10, 15, 20 years. This is a medium to long-term transition in energy. And to make this transition begin, we need public policies, we need the subsidized credit from the government. And I think that developing countries need the help of developed countries as well to help to boost this energy transition, because we have to see the triple bottom line of sustainability, right? The people, the environmental, and the economic aspect as well, all together. So that's how I see the situation in energy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now, Zoili, insurance for the future. Seems like you're already focused on this. And so what are the costs and how do you all work with these costs in the co-ops in Madagascar?
Okay. Yeah, as you can see, we already did the difference between the use of fire for non-co-op member and co-op member. Why? Because of the Rainforest Alliance certification, because Rainforest Alliance certification norms and standard is promoting the biodiversity improvement and also promoting natural resource management and also ensure livelihood of the producer to be certified And the fourth principle for Rainforest Alliance is to really improve cooperative management. So if we didn't do that, then all of those principles regarding biodiversity conservation, natural resource management, in fact, the soil management, the water management, the ecosystem would fail out. As I said, Madagascar is the vanilla production in Madagascar is really growing in a natural ecosystem under forests. So if this project Mafatuki Insurance of the Future was not done, then we will have, chopping down all the forests in this area. Second, how do I say, if we didn't do that, then people will chop down the forest. As you have seen in 2020, after the decline of the price of vanilla, they chopped down the forest to produce rice. So that's why that is also a benefit of doing this activity. And in the future, we are under prospection to sell carbon credit for those farmers. So yeah, for the tree planting and all the reforestation activity, all the forest management, we may, because last year we have made the calculation, the cooperative have sequestered 10,000 tons of carbons. So if we find buyers for carbon, for the carbon credit, that would help farmers to continue doing those good activities at the edge.
Thank you. Thank you, Zoe. So Rebecca Carter had talked about co-ops are in the middle. So you have the world problem, this major humanity problem. Then you have different governments, which Brazil and Mexico, Madagascar, Brazil, all India, all of this have this government that we have to deal with. Then there's these large companies, and then we have the people. Co-ops in the middle of the people, whether employees or people, and we are producing, as you all have talked about, different ways of solving this problem. And we know this is important because it's in our DNA to solve social issues. But I want to get at the personal level because we only have a few minutes left. So if you could take 30, 45 seconds to tell me, do you like what you're doing and why? And Zoe Lee, why don't you start?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, what? I have in my heart the environment and community growing, during my experience as development agent, I definitely would love to see how community can feel and can understand that environment is the basis of their activity, specifically for rural community who are using land and soil. Yeah, I think we have a lot to do because even if we are doing what is happening now, it's really kind of one drop in the ocean. But even though we cannot just give up, we should always continue and continue and continue.
So the answer is yes, you really like what you're doing.
Yeah.
You love it. Wow. Eduardo, do you like what you're doing and why?
Sure, Vernon. In terms of micro, and in the big picture, in the small picture, the micro, I like working as a group. We are 80 people at Revolu Solar, so I like everybody. I really like the movement that we are creating here in Rio. Everybody's so passionate about what we're doing. Most of them are volunteers, so everybody's very passionate, and I like getting involved close with people, with different people with very different backgrounds. We have engineers, we have economists, we have local leaders in the favelas, the low-income community, and we learn a lot with each other. And in the big picture as well, that's what I believe. I used to work in a bank, and I saw no impact on what I used to do on the world. And I did internship there. So I said, no, I cannot keep doing this. And I got in love with solar, this solar revolution.
We're running out of time. I want to get to Tyrone and Julia.
Okay, but yeah, so yeah.
Okay. Tyrone, 30 seconds. Do you like what you're doing?
So yes, I really like, because I firmly believe, and I believe that my principle is love nature and love humanity. And this is my personal belief. And I'm working with people, the cooperatives, and spreading this message of cooperativism and working with them together, ordinary people achieving the extraordinary things. It's something exemplary. I really love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Julia, thank you very much.
Yes, I also love what I do. I am a worker owner and a member of Equal Exchange as a worker owned cooperative. And I think what we're able to do in partnership with the cooperatives around the world is really energizing. I find it, I think we're all very overwhelmed with the state of the world. At least I am, and a lot of folks in my social circles are overwhelmed with the state of the world. And it feels like cooperatives and kind of this realm allows us to take action and kind of facilitate some of these changes. And there's a flexibility and innovation in working with cooperatives that I find really energizing in working with people. And I think we're social beings, and there's something that feels really good about being connected with people that are focused on, doing positive work. So
thank you.
I love what I do.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for this panel. And I want to thank NCBA again for bringing us up, and so we could talk about this major issue. And everybody that's listening, you're probably already in a co-op. And if you're not, please do, and see what your co-op can do to help solve this problem, because most co-ops will solve community problems. This is just one more we have to solve. Thank you, guys. Thank you so very much. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much to everyone for being here with us today. As we start to wrap up, I'm going to introduce our partner here for the international session at the 2021 Cooperative Impact Conference, and that is OCDC. And here to provide us with some closing remarks is our good friend, Luann Werner. Hey, Luann, she's the Deputy Executive Director of OCDC. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, John. And I guess to reiterate, on behalf of the Overseas Cooperative Development Council and NCBA CLUSA, we thank you all for being here. With special gratitude to Tiana Razafi Mahatrata for joining us live from Madagascar today. And once again, the speakers, Dr. Rebecca Carter, Ann Vaughn, Frank Berg, as well as the panelists, Eduardo Avila, Julia Bumgardner, Tarun Bhargava, Zoeli Ramanas, and the expert moderator, Vernon Oakes. The level of experience pulled together for this was remarkable, and thanks to them for sharing all their knowledge. Climate has received a lot of attention with the recent UN Climate Change Conference. We want to be sure that the attention does not lose momentum. All of you and your role with cooperatives are part of the solution. And we have heard here today over and over, cooperatives are the key middle that can make change, as Rebecca Carter from World Resources Institute said. Promoting practical approaches, sustainable production systems, partnering with the private sector, and many other ideas were shared. The panelists left the final mandate. When they were asked about the cost to co-ops of developing new operations, products, or services that will reduce negative climate impacts, the response was a resounding, we can't afford not to take action. The costs of doing nothing far outweigh the cost of investing in climate-friendly solutions. Thanks for being here to take these ideas, to share them, and apply them to your ongoing cooperative initiative. Let's keep the momentum growing. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day or evening.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next one.